Hello and welcome to Crossroads Politics here on WTHR+. I'm Dustin Grove. Headlines this week were dominated by the Iran conflict that has, as of Friday, already left more than 800 people dead, including at least 6 U.S. service members and more than 160 civilians in Iran. Nick Robertson reports Iran is trying to appoint a new supreme leader as bombs, missiles and drones continue to fall on both sides.
The council is supposed to appoint a new leader and decide amongst themselves. It's hard to see how President Trump can interject himself into that. The best effects that the United States appear to be able to create is on the ground, going after the drone launchers, the missile launchers, the sort of headquarters of the security forces in Iran, because that's a way to sort of lift the lid off the population. And President Trump, Pete Hegseth as well, have talked about the population of Iran being able to come out on the streets. So getting rid of the security services, a very big, complicated, maybe impossible scale job to achieve from the air, that seems to be underway. What we've witnessed here today in Saudi Arabia again is Iran's ability to sort of pick and choose and change its tempo. There were a lot more strikes around Riyadh last night than we've seen recently. 3 ballistic missiles were intercepted on the way to the Prince Sultan Air Base, important air base just outside of Riyadh. There was a drone that was intercepted a couple of hours later in the east around energy facilities. Around about that same time, a cruise missile was intercepted near that important air base, and then several more salvos of drones around Riyadh, possibly around that air base. The knock-on effect of that was some of the international flights coming into Riyadh didn't arrive. Now, it's not quite clear if it was that intense missile activity, but there was a knock-on effect on the ground. And we've been at the airport today talking to people who've been trying to get out of the region. I talked to people that have driven 13 hours from Kuwait to get to Riyadh, to get on a flight back to Europe. I talked to a young Spanish couple who'd driven 8 hours from Kuwait, again, to get on a charter flight out of Riyadh. So Riyadh is a hub for people exiting the region, but what we've seen Iran do overnight is effectively have an impact, it appears, on the air services operating out of here. Most of them are running, but there was a blip overnight.
All right, so that was Nick Robertson on Friday morning talking about the military aspect, but also the civilian aspect, all the civilians trying to get out of that region. Thousands of Americans were in the Middle East when the first bombs began to fall February 28th. We've been tracking their attempts to stay safe and get home all week long. Ella Rhodes talked with a guy from Zionsville who was just across the Strait of Hormuz in Dubai as the conflict broke out.
Like I said, back in the Indian, what do we call it?
From his 3-day business trip to now a week-long stay and counting, Ismail India is still in Dubai.
I mean, a little frustrating, and life things happen, no matter what. As long as you have your health, you can work. What they say, what doesn't kill you make you stronger.
India first shared with us these videos on Monday. The missile strikes he saw in Dubai over the weekend. He hopes his 3rd attempt home on the 15th is the charm.
I was a little bit off, say the 15th, but it's about another 10 more days. So I try to find different way to get out, but there's not. So, I'm not the only one.
Inja's wife, Julia Pettigrew, spends 5 hours a day on the phone to try to find a way to bring her husband home.
That's been kind of a struggle. Actually, it's been a nightmare.
Pleading for someone to help.
They have to do more. I urge them to do more. I urge Congress, the United States of America, the president to do more. They need more to help our people to come home. They have families, they have lives they want to get back to.
Including their family business in Indianapolis.
We're sad, but once again, we have faith. So I have faith more in God than I do America, period.
But she's relieved Inja isn't all alone across the world. He befriended a young man from Switzerland, also stuck in Dubai.
It is unreal. I cannot live nowhere without him. We go have breakfast. We in the coffee shop, have coffee together. We have dinner together. we hang out. Just like my my daughter, he's the same age like my daughter. He's my angel.
Yeah, we're family now.
Staying positive in the most challenging of times.
That was Ella Rhodes reporting. And you may have noticed we're calling this the Iran conflict. That's because according to the Constitution, Congress holds the sole power to formally declare war. Lawmakers did get a briefing on Tuesday, but Senator Todd Young, who represents Indiana, wasn't happy about that delay. He talked with me on Thursday about the conflict and congressional oversight. Senator, when Emily Longnecker, my colleague, spoke with Andre Carson yesterday, he said President Trump shouldn't, quote, get to drag our country into a foreign war without authorization from Congress. Are you okay with how this offensive started over the weekend? Should he have come to you first?
I think ideally you come to Congress, you unify the American people, or at least enough of the American people to march forward and all agree that the public has been educated, informed, that plans have been stress tested and improved, that there is sufficient contingency planning to keep us safe and secure. But Congress fell short. In a bipartisan fashion, we fell short to do this. There have been some of us, myself, for example, who for years have been talking about the importance of congressional oversight and engagement as it relates to war powers, an issue that often falls along party lines, which is, for me, it is not done so. But here we are, and that might be the difference, candidly, between myself and so many of my Democratic colleagues like Congressman Carson. I think that once you're involved in a war against the leading state sponsor of international terror, the Islamic Republic, that has shown a history of developing nuclear capacities which are intended to become nuclear weapons, of developing missile technology which is ultimately intended to strike America, I think it would be irresponsible to abruptly disengage, which is what Senator Carson and others, I understand, to be supportive of. So we need to be pragmatic. Hoosiers are pragmatic people, but we also need to be principled as we think about our responsibilities moving forward.
President Trump come to Congress and presented whatever it was he had to you. Would you have approved this offensive?
Well, it's hard to tell, because what's unfortunate about this situation is though we were fortunate to have a classified hearing yesterday, we were 100 hours into a war by the time we got the hearing. There has not been a lot of follow-up. There are still questions to be answered and facts to be known. So I don't know whether I would have. The case was never made to members of Congress. It was never made to the American people in a fulsome way. So that's where I think we've fallen short. But again, this is a horrible regime. We are now at war with that regime as a country. Not as a party, as a country, and we need to do whatever we can to bring this to a close quickly, but to be successful. And if we were just to turn around and pretend that we weren't at war, that would be very, very dangerous to America.
What do you tell people who are concerned that this is going to turn into a years-long rebuilding effort to ensure Iran doesn't end up with the same kind of regime that it just had?
Well, I really don't believe that that's what the president wants. There is uncertainty associated with the current situation. The members of the administration, Secretary of State, for example, has admitted as much. And I'm committed to doing whatever I can to make the best out of this situation, hopefully the very best. I hope all of us will look back and say, despite the procedural, weaknesses of this process, everything turned out really well. But to the extent things aren't optimal, then it's my job to try and make the best out of it, but do so quickly and in a way that hopefully is consistent with what the American people want right now.
What do you still want to know right now that you don't?
Well, some of it will have to be covered in a classified setting, but there are additional questions from myself, and I benefit from robust questioning from my colleagues as well and other stakeholders about contingency plans, about economic implications, about our alliance system, and about the risks we're bearing in other regions of the world by involving ourselves here, about our supply chain capacity and our ability to produce a sufficient number of munitions, about the fiscal drain. So there are a lot of remaining questions, and we have time to have some of these answered. But amidst all of this, we are at war and against a horrible regime. And I want to make sure that now we're in this, we accomplish some basic political objectives of making sure that this Iranian regime can never, ever develop nuclear weapons and completely halt production of these very dangerous missiles as they march towards development of an intercontinental ballistic missile, which could hit the United States.
Democrats have been sharply critical of the conflict in the days since. Our 13 News State House reporter Emily Longnecker spoke with Representative Carson, who represents Indianapolis in Congress, on Wednesday.
Thank you, sir, for joining us today.
Thank you.
You've been briefed on the situation in Iran by this point. Given what you know now, do you think the U.S. had justification for these strikes there?
I really don't think there has been any justification to Congress or to the American people explaining why this was even necessary. I think this pattern of threatening action, building up forces, striking without any real oversight, it's the kind of abuse of powers that the War Powers Act was designed to stop. And my colleagues and I are demanding an immediate briefing from the White House. And I think any further military action should come before Congress.
You're on House Intelligence. Has intelligence had any kind of deeper briefing to give you any kind of clarity about why this started and where it's headed?
Well, without speaking out of school, what I will say is that Donald Trump is dragging the U.S. into a foreign war without congressional authorization, bypassing the constitutional role of Congress to declare war. For someone who always invokes the founding fathers, he's going against the vision of the founding fathers. And, the War Powers Resolution exists precisely to prevent unilateral war decisions by the president. This vote isn't symbolic, it's a constitutional check.
The Senate votes today on that. The House has that tomorrow. What are you hearing about how members of Congress are feeling and which way they're going to vote on this?
I think a lot of members are upset. Well, we have a bipartisan bill by Representative Massey, who's a Republican, and Democrat Ro Khanna. And I think that the essence of the bill is really about, if we allow Donald Trump to wage war without debate or authorization, we effectively give up the legislative branch's very serious responsibility to the executive branch. And this is beyond politics. This is about the Constitution. It's about returning war-making authority to the people's representatives.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'm just, Donald Trump, he doesn't get to drag our country into a foreign war without authorization from Congress.
Speaking of Congress, I've heard some people pretty critical of Congress saying, hey, where have y'all been? This started last weekend. We're only getting to this now. Should your body have acted sooner?
Well, the Republican-controlled Congress chose to keep us in recess. And that has been a strategy of keeping us in, recess, which is scheduled, but prolonging recesses simply to protect their districts in a midterm election, because Donald Trump's approval ratings have dropped significantly, and there's a chance that Democrats could regain the House. And in regaining the House, I think we have to reclaim our constitutional responsibility to demand accountability and transparency for any use of military force.
Has House Intelligence received any kind of briefing on strategic objectives or risks or exit strategy or anything that gives you more details about what's going on here, why it started, how long it should last, and how long it should go?
I attended a briefing yesterday with Secretary Marco Rubio and as well as Secretary Hegseth of the Department of War, now the Department of War. There's an intelligence briefing with the committee later this afternoon, of which I plan on attending, and we'll see what happens then.
Have you heard anything that leads you to believe that there was an imminent threat to the United States to justify these attacks?
Absolutely not. I mean, we've seen with Israel's military offensive, which has intensified decades-long conflict and moved beyond defensive action into direct offensive operations. And so the U.S. should not automatically join offensive military campaigns without clear congressional authority and really a defined U.S. interest. I think war with Iran places our troops at risk. It destabilizes the region. It strains relationships with our partners. And, it's happening now. It's not hypothetical. And Israel and the United States continue to conduct unprecedented strikes in Iran. And Iran has responded in a retaliatory way against U.S. bases. We've lost several U.S. citizens. My heart goes out to their families. And they've struck our bases. And this escalation hasn't been contained. It's not limited. It's leaking into other countries and risking military lives and especially civilian lives, and more importantly, in my mind, American lives. And so escalation without strategy, I think that's the path to a greater war that will drag us into another endless conflict that taxpayers are going to have to foot the bill for.
When you're talking about loss of life for American citizens, are you specifically talking about the 6 military members that you've been?
Yes, ma'am.
Those 6. Okay. As far as concerns for security here in the homeland, I mean, there has been discussion about stay on alert. We could see anything here stateside. Any knowledge of any specific threats or concerns that are being brought up?
No, this is an issue. I mean, given my work with the Indiana Department of Homeland Security as a supervisor and a watch officer, my work with excise police, the sheriff's department, now with the Committee on China, and of course with the Intelligence Committee, I'm always concerned. It's something I lose sleep over. It's something that I've spoken to the director of OD&I, Tulsi Gabbard, about. I've spoken to the FBI director about, the director of Homeland Security, the CIA director, and others. This is a deep concern for me. I serve on the committees of jurisdiction. And because this appears to be a forever war, I'm always concerned about what may come out of Tehran, be it an attack on U.S. soil, targeting major cities, targeting our grids, targeting our electoral system. They have capacity to disrupt our cyber networks. Perhaps not to the degree yet of a China or Russia, but to a very notable degree. That always concerns me. But at the same time, I think diplomacy must be our first line of defense. The people of Iran are demanding change. I stand in solidarity with them in their fight for freedom. But I also have a duty to speak out against very grave human rights violations and urge the Iranian regime to step down and listen to the will of the people.
I was speaking to an expert on the Middle East from IU, and his concern was, okay, fine, bring down a regime, but to bring down an entire state then leads to a power vacuum and bad actors flowing in from wherever to take over. Are you hearing any concerns about that, or is that top of mind in some of these discussions?
Well, the 2 or 3 people who were at least on the short list for leadership have been killed. And my fear is that if the U.S. installs a leader, that leader could be overthrown. that, if not, have to face multiple assassination attempts, unfortunately. But even with that, I think you could see multiple civil wars on the ground to fill this power vacuum. Even its governing body and its various councils won't be able to solve this issue in a timely manner. Khamenei died a martyr, and that means a lot to a lot of people on the ground. And so the question becomes, for those who appreciate or enjoy his clerical style of leadership, his theological style of leadership, who may take that place? And is that person formidable? Is that person rational? Is that person someone who represents the will of the Iranian people? Or is that person someone who is willing to abuse, misuse, misinterpret, and misapply religious texts in the name of protecting the people? It is not unique to Iran. It is not unique to that region. It is done here as well in the United States of America.
And a major development from the administration on Thursday when President Trump fired Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem. She faced growing criticism from Democrats and Republicans over alleged corruption and her handling of the president's immigration crackdown. He named Oklahoma Senator Markway Mullen as his nominee to replace Noem. We'll continue to follow that. 20 states are suing to block the president's latest round of tariffs. That lawsuit was filed on Thursday. President Trump called for new tariffs after the Supreme Court blocked his first round of tariffs. The states say these latest short-term tariffs are just an attempt to get around the Supreme Court. And March just started, but the 2026 midterm election is already well underway with the first primaries of the year. In Texas, State Senator James Tallarico beat U.S. Representative Jasmine Crockett in the Democratic primary for Senate. Tallarico was catapulted into the national spotlight when the FCC blocked his interview with Stephen Colbert from being broadcast. Meanwhile, Texas Republicans are going to have a primary runoff. Incumbent U.S. Senator John Cornyn got 41% of the vote to Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton's 40%. That runoff will happen in May. Incumbent Republican U.S. House Rep Dan Crenshaw lost his primary to State Representative Steve Toth. North Carolina had landslides in both of its Senate primaries. Michael Whatley will represent Republicans, with former Governor Roy Cooper set to represent Democrats in the race. In both North Carolina and Texas, Democrats had higher primary turnout than Republicans. Lawmakers are looking to pass a bill that would create a review board for deadly weather disasters. It would be pretty much like the National Transportation Safety Board. It would be independent with at least 7 members. The board would all have a background in meteorology. Everybody would have a background in social sciences and emergency management as well. They would investigate flood or hurricane disasters. Back here in Indiana, the race for Secretary of State has a new contender.
Actually, when I was the mayor, even though I was a Republican mayor, everybody knew I governed for everybody.
A familiar face. Why Indy's last Republican mayor is running as an independent for that statewide office. And big tech promises not to pass on costs from new data centers. We'll tell you how Hoosiers are responding to the non-binding pledge. But first,
local governments need to make it simple, not complicated.
Governor Braun offering his thoughts on the recently ended legislative session. It's next here on Crossroads Politics. Welcome back. Just a few days after the legislative session ended, Indiana's governor is giving his take on how he thinks it all went. Emily Longnecker was at a press conference this week where he summarized the session's achievements.
Well, one word we kept hearing this entire session when it came to the agendas of both the governor and lawmakers on both sides of the aisle was this word affordability. And today, Governor Braun said energy affordability was the biggest topic this session. The governor applauded the passage of a key bill that addresses the cost of electricity. House Bill 1002 moves toward multi-year rate plans with performance incentives for utility companies, including rewards and penalties based on affordability and the speed of service restoration.
With performance-based rate making, utilities will have skin in the game.
Another piece of the affordability puzzle, the cost of housing. This session, lawmakers passed legislation meant to tackle housing costs by increasing supply. The original bill called for loosening regulations and cutting red tape to make building easier. Much of that language got watered down, though, after local governments pushed back. Democrats called the bill a shadow of its former self. Braun said the key was not to over-legislate, but stress cooperation between local governments and builders.
Local governments need to make it simple, not complicated.
When it comes to education, Governor Braun called legislation banning cell phones for the entire school day one of the session's biggest wins.
The ban not only reinforces student focus in the classroom, but also social presence in the lunchroom, hallway, study hall. Kids need to learn and grow without the interruptions of big tech.
Lawmakers also passed new social media restrictions for minors, a push that became even more prescient after the death of Fisher's teen, Haley Busby. Following Busby's death, the governor called on the General Assembly to do something this session to try and prevent future tragedies.
I think it'll be the catalyst for more to come.
At the start of the session, Governor Braun called for greater cooperation with federal immigration authorities as a way to improve public safety. Lawmakers passed Senate Bill 76, which expands that cooperation beyond just police in Indiana to city and town governments.
Which will make clear that Indiana is not a safe harbor for illegal immigration.
Democrats said it was built on fear and suspicion, saying it turned safe spaces like schools into an arm of federal immigration enforcement. The governor also praised legislation that calls for the BMV to work closely with the Department of Homeland Security to revoke the commercial driver's licenses of drivers whose legal status has expired. And when it comes to that legislation to create the Northwest Stadium Authority to try and bring the Chicago Bears to Hammond, Indiana, Governor Braun said there was no new news, but he called that legislation great headway and said it said a lot about what Indiana is willing to do to say it's open for business, to bring business here. At the Indiana State House, Emily Longnecker, 13 News.
Emily and Indiana Capitol Chronicle editor Nikki Kelly joined me for a special episode breaking down the legislative session and the big bills that passed, and you can find it on demand right here on WTHR+. Indiana patients dealing with cancer and the organizations that help them are celebrating a new law passed in that session, one they tell Emily will make a big difference when it comes to their treatment.
Metastatic cancer can be devastating. It is a lifelong disease that requires intense treatment to try and continue to outsmart the cancer.
Rebecca Birch knows this well. She works for Susan G. Komen, an organization that helps people fighting breast cancer.
With that intense treatment comes side effects and drugs that have to be taken to manage those.
Before the passage of a new law, though, Birch says insurance companies would often make patients try one drug first that costs less than the original drug recommended by the doctor.
But what the opposition tells you is, look, we have to put these measures in place because they help save money. Because what if everybody just got the most expensive drug, even if they didn't need it, then the insurance prices would go up.
Now, because of a new law signed by Governor Braun this week, patients fighting any kind of cancer that's spread won't be required to try multiple drugs before the insurance company agrees to pay for the one their doctor first recommended.
We just believe the decision should be made between the provider and the patient in these critical instances.
The bill received large bipartisan support. Its author, Democratic State Representative Cherish Pryor, released a statement when the House first passed the bill during session. It said in part, quote, "This bill allows providers to determine the best source of treatment and patients to have immediate access to that treatment, not suffer through a time-consuming trial and error process." Supporters of the new law, like the folks at Susan G. Komen, say it allows cancer patients to focus on the fight they're waging against cancer, not a fight with insurance companies about treatment. Emily Longnecker, 13 News.
That new law goes into effect July 1st. Still ahead.
Just think it's important that the office be as nonpartisan, professional, and low-key as possible.
Our extended interview with Indiana's newest candidate for Secretary of State, former Indianapolis Mayor Greg Ballard.
It's too little too late. AES has already been bought by BlackRock.
Hoosiers trust big tech not to raise their utility rates? Fallout from a new pledge. Next on Crossroads Politics. Welcome back. Now to a big pledge coming from big tech. Companies behind massive data center facilities promising to cover the costs to generate the energy they use. But as these projects move forward, some living near them say they've still got questions, a lot of them. Ashton Hackman explains what's in the pledge and how neighbors in central Indiana are reacting.
Tech giants are rapidly expanding across Indiana, bringing massive data center facilities that require huge amounts of electricity to run.
There's a golden opportunity in front of us to really unlock all this potential of this AI moment. But none of that is possible if the communities that are welcoming and considering data centers are seeing their electricity and water prices go up.
And communities have not been welcoming lately, with large protests blocking multiple data center projects in central Indiana. Utility costs are a big part of those protests. Data centers can require enormous amounts of electricity. Sometimes a single data center will use enough to power tens of thousands of homes. The new Ratepayer Protection Pledge, signed at the White House Wednesday, includes companies like Meta, who broke ground on their new data center last month in Lebanon's Leap District. The pledge promises tech companies will cover the full cost of generating the electricity their data centers use, instead of passing those costs on to other customers. In Monrovia, southwest of Indianapolis,
We're just right over the hill from this data center, and the electric rates are just insane.
Chris Lamberson keeps a close eye on the progress of what lines his backyard, where Google is already fast at work unearthing their data center campus. Lamberson said he hopes Google sticks to their pledge.
It's too little too late. AES has already been bought by BlackRock. AES has already hiked rates to astronomical rates where people cannot afford it now. So we don't need rates to stay steady. We need them to come down.
Lamberson said it's now up to state legislators to pass protections for consumers. Several data center bills were introduced this session. None of them got a hearing. In Monrovia, Ashton Hackman, 13 News.
All right, to be continued. Indianapolis leaders are delaying a key vote on a controversial data center project on the near northeast side. The Indy Metropolitan Development Commission is granting a continuance on the Metro Blocks data center project. That means commissioners will not take it up for 30 days. The counselor for that district, Ron Gibson, supports the project. He says it would bring economic development to the area, but the project has also faced public opposition and protests. That next meeting is set for April 1st, and we plan to be there. This all comes against the background of one of Indiana's biggest utilities getting bought. Officials from both political parties are now raising questions about the announcement of the investor group acquiring AES. AES is a global energy company, and AES Indiana is the main power company for the city of Indianapolis. They announced this week they're being purchased by a consortium and will become a private company. AES Indiana would remain a state-regulated monopoly, but State Treasurer Daniel Elliott says he has concerns about all the investor groups purchasing the AES. He says BlackRock often operates with a political agenda, and the Qatari Investment Authority has known ties to terrorists.
None of these organizations are really fitting Hoosier values anyway, but now I start to wonder, are they going to be managing based of principles that are based on what their own agendas are and not thinking about ratepayers?
AES Indiana postponed a community open house Tuesday night, saying it received violent threats on social media. There's the statement right there. Two more public meetings are scheduled for next week, and you can find those dates online at WTHR.com. Still ahead, reaching out to Indiana's independent voters.
I think it's just important that we get ahead of this and understand what we're trying to do, that we want to do the right thing for the Hoosiers. 41%, I just think that's a big number.
41% of voters are independent. That's what Greg Ballard is saying. Our extended conversation with independent Secretary of State candidate Ballard next on Crossroads Politics. Welcome back. The race for Indiana Secretary of State suddenly has a third candidate. Former Indianapolis Mayor Greg Ballard is throwing his hat in the ring, but Indy's last Republican mayor is now running as an independent. He sat down with Emily Longnecker to explain why.
You have announced that you are running for Secretary of State as an independent, saying in a video, when you see something is broken and know you can fix it, you step forward. Tell me about that. Is that the Marine in you?
That is a little bit of the Marine in me. I don't think there's any question about that. It's both parties have gotten a little bit toxic, and they're going to the left and to the right a little further than I think where most people are. And sometimes I worry that they're serving the party and not the people. And in this particular race, Secretary of State, I believe it needs to be a nonpartisan office, independently run. And I think I fill that bill quite nicely. When I was the mayor, even though I was a Republican mayor, everybody knew I governed for everybody. And I want to do that as a Secretary of State also.
Yeah, you had a reputation for being a moderate Republican that I remember. How do you think that and your experience as mayor uniquely equips you to this role that no major party candidate can fill?
Well, I have a long history between what I did in the Marine Corps and what I did as a mayor. Gave me a really good perspective about the importance of voting in the country. And I've been in countries, obviously, that don't vote. And so I understand how important that is to the state and to the country. And I want to make sure that we do it the right way. And it's honestly, as the years go by, it becomes really more important to me because I realize just how different it is. And I want to make sure that we do it the right way without partisanship.
I was going to say, how do you see running as an independent, how do you see that kind of campaign contributing maybe to the health of Indiana's political system, especially in a historically partisan office?
Great question. As an independent, that's where most of the people are anyway. And I think will be very helpful in looking at this, like you say, from a rational, practical background. And that's why we want to do what we want to do, which is providing the voter guides and things like that we put out there already. So I just think it's important that the office be as nonpartisan, professional, and low-key as possible. It shouldn't be in the news except at election time.
Secretary of State works with state legislators, business groups, county election officials. You are running as an independent. Are you concerned that might affect your ability to build legislative or administrative support once in office?
Yeah, I don't think so, because I know lots of the people. I don't know all the clerks around the state, obviously, but I know lots of people in the State House. I know lots of people in central Indiana, and I don't think my running as an independent will affect that whatsoever, actually. I think those relationships go beyond party labels, and most people know who I am, and they know how I operate, and they know that I want to do the best thing and the right thing for the right reasons all the time. So I don't think that will be an issue whatsoever.
So Secretary of State candidates here aren't chosen on primaries but party conventions. So how does that system influence your strategy as an independent?
Well, the primary system, I think, is a better way of determining who should run for the parties, frankly. When you get to convention, you don't know what's going to happen. So we're just going to wait to see what the Democrats and the Republicans do. So no reason to comment because there are challengers, obviously, at least 2 challengers in each party, so they won't know until June. I'm running right now, so I think it's just important that we get ahead of this and understand what we're trying to do, that we want to do the right thing for the Hoosiers. 41%, I just think that's a big number. 41% of the Hoosiers are independent. I think that's amazing. Only 29% Republican and 21% Democrat. When people look at those numbers, that's just amazing to me. And that means that lots of people in the state are disaffected. They are upset with the direction of both parties and the extreme nature sometimes that comes out in those parties. And I think they're looking for somebody practical, rational, somebody who will do the job, somebody they can be proud of. And that's what I intend to do.
The office oversees elections, business services, securities regulations. What are your top 3 priorities should you become Secretary of State, and how do they differ from the current priorities of the current administration? Well,
I want to be able to run good elections. I want a good relationship with all the clerks. So that's just baseline to the office. I know there are four sections, 4 divisions within the office, but beyond that, I think what I mentioned earlier about having a voter guide is very important. I think the Secretary of State should take that on and have a voter guide. That is not happening in the state of Indiana. It's in 16 or 17 states right now, a nonpartisan voter guide. I think that will bring more people out to vote because lots of people don't vote because they don't know what's happening. They don't know who the people are. They don't know if there are any ballot referendums, anything like that. So if we give them a nonpartisan voting guide, they'll have something in their hands that they can take to the ballot and say, okay, this is how I'm going to vote. I think that would help quite a bit. The other part is I'm not going to endorse anybody I won't fundraise for anybody. I won't donate to anybody. So it'll be a completely nonpartisan office. So those two things are completely different than what's happening right now.
I mean, the state historically has low voter turnout, so you're hoping that a voter guide will help with that, and you think it will?
I do think it will. I think the more knowledge people have about voting, I think the more likely that they will go vote.
Do you think Hoosiers lack voter confidence in this?
I think some do. I'm not sure that everybody does. But I think there's enough of it out there that somebody coming in saying this is the way we should do business, and like I say, professional, low key, let's get the job done, let's do the right thing, is something that's needed right now.
In terms of voter access, when it comes to early voting, there was a proposal before lawmakers this session to cut that time from 28 days to 16. It failed. What's your position on the current length of Indiana's early voting period?
I like the current length right now. I don't think it should shorten at all.
Do you think it should be lengthened?
No, I think 28 days, about a month, sounds about right to me. That gets several weekends in there, which I think is pretty important.
Do you support any modifications to early voting, such as voting more voting centers, additional weekend hours?
Something to look at. I think everything's okay right now in that regard. Longer hours might be something to look at. I'd be hesitant to go beyond a month ahead of time. I think people are comfortable with that. They know that when October rolls around, it's getting about that time where we should be looking at voting. I always early vote, and I think the convenience of it is tremendous. So I don't really want to take that away from anybody.
How would you respond to future attempts to rewrite voting laws around access? What principles guide your view on early voting access?
More access. That's the principle. We want more people to get out there. More knowledge, more access is really the way to do this. That will be the principles.
And you think that's possibly by expanding hours on the weekends that are already there?
Perhaps. I think we need to look at that. I think the voter guide will help out tremendously.
When it comes to voting centers, more than 70 of Indiana's 92 counties have moved to a vote center model instead of using the precinct model. What role should the Secretary of State play in encouraging or guiding counties towards that vote center model? Do you think that should happen?
It's fine. Just from my Marine days, the person on the ground, the person handling it locally, makes a lot of sense to me. So however the counties want to do it, it's kind of fine with me. I just need to make sure they follow what we need in the state of Indiana. But I think moving toward that model, like you say, 70 are already there. I think keep going that way.
So you think the state should move to that as a default option?
Yeah. Right now, I'd like the choice because some people have been in those offices for a while, and I don't want to necessarily upset what they know how to do well.
How would your office, if you're running it, ensure equitable access to vote centers across urban, suburban, rural counties?
I think it's, for the most part, I think it's there, and I want it to continue. There's lots of people, there are a lot of pockets out there that don't vote historically, and I want them to get out and vote, urban areas in particular. I think don't vote as much as they should, sometimes in the far rural areas also. Those are two areas I think I'd like to concentrate on and get them as much knowledge and talk to them, frankly, as much as possible about the importance of voting.
Ballot referendums, should they be on Indiana ballots?
I think so. Actually, I think we should expand the capability in the state to do that. I do.
Moving to some questions about your opponents, the current office holder, Secretary of State Diego Morales, he's been criticized for spending and administrative decisions during his tenure. Do you think some of his actions have cut into the public trust? And if so, how will your leadership restore some of that trust?
I don't really want to talk about the current office holder. I know he's been in there a while, and I think people can make their own decision on that. Plus, we don't know if he's going to be running. We have to wait until June, and when June comes around, maybe we can talk about that a little bit. But my intent is to worry about what I think is right for Hoosiers. I really don't want to go negative and talk about those things because I just don't think that's appropriate. In fact, that's completely the opposite of what I'm trying to do in this race.
A possible Democratic opponent, Bo Bai, has said there needs to be a cleanup in the office to combat waste, corruption, and improving election integrity. Do you agree with that assessment?
I think you need to ask him about that. So I'm going to run it the way it should be run. Like I said, and I don't know who on the Democratic Republican side is going to come forward as I with me in particular. what looks like should be the normal way of doing business isn't always the normal way of doing business. And you can just go back to the 2007 election when I ran for mayor, and you see that what's to be expected is not always what happens.
The online absentee ballot application tool was recently offline due to some technical issues, policy issues. What would you do to ensure online voter services are reliable?
Yeah, that was a testing glitch, so I don't want to weigh in too much on that. I think it should be tested. So and the primaries are in May, so I think that was part of the process. In this case, I don't want to necessarily think that's too big of a deal.
Would you explore expanding no excuse absentee voting in Indiana?
Not sure about that one, actually. I like to be straightforward on the voting aspect of all this. I want to make sure that I am in favor of voter ID, no question about that. Mm-hmm. But I want to make sure that people have access to it. So I'll have to look at that, to be honest with you.
This year, the Secretary of State's office turned over voter rolls at the request of the DOJ, saying that it was to safeguard elections and support citizenship verification efforts. It was, considered controversial by some. What would you have done differently if that request came in, or would you have done anything differently?
I don't think I would have done it. I wouldn't have turned them over. That's Hoosier voters, not the federal voters. That's the Hoosier voters. I would not have turned over those rolls.
There was some concern about, people's information being shared,
Yes.
Some privacy concerns. Do you
Yes.
share that concern?
Yes, yeah, absolutely I do.
Should Indiana have clearer laws or guidelines about when and how voter data can be shared outside the state?
Yes, I think so. We've always been a nation that valued our privacy. Not just Hoosiers, but everybody in the country values the privacy, and it's probably being eroded a little bit more than people know right now. And so all that data on personnel, on people in the state, I think should be protected as much as possible.
Is there anything else you want Hoosiers to know?
I want them to realize that here's another choice besides the path that the parties are going down. An independent voice, somebody who'll be nonpartisan as we move forward, somebody who'll do the right thing for the right reasons, and that's. I want them to be proud of who's in office right now, and I think I can make them proud.
Was it difficult to step into that independent role away from the Republican label?
It is. It's awkward a little bit, but actually by the time I made that actual decision, I was very comfortable with it. I really was. As I told quite a few people, I've been asked to run for office for quite a while now, all sorts of different offices, and nothing felt right. This feels right to me.
Okay. Well, former Indianapolis Mayor and Secretary of State hopeful Greg Ballard, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Bo Bai, the son of former Indiana Governor and Senator Evan Bai, is running for the Democratic nomination for Secretary of State. He issued this statement here saying, quote, "This race is a referendum on Diego Morales' tenure as Secretary of State, and we are building the only campaign that can defeat him, put an end to the blatant corruption, and restore the office to all Hoosiers." Incumbent Secretary of State Diego Morales has issued a response to the announcement as well. He sent us this statement saying, in part, "Secretary Morales welcomes all challenges." He then went on to say, "And with this recent announcement, it seems we now have two Democrats in the race. One is just calling himself an independent." Some Hoosiers got a special trip to the Oval Office this week. This story comes from our partners at the Indiana Capitol Chronicle. These are the state Senate candidates President Trump is endorsing for the May primary. 5 of the 6 are running in GOP primaries, hoping to oust the incumbents who voted against congressional redistricting. Now, if you've been following this story, you know President Trump and Vice President Vance and Governor Braun, they pushed hard for redistricting in red states like Indiana to try and pick up more Republican seats in Congress for the midterms later this year. But state lawmakers here in Indiana voted it down. How much financial support might these Trump-backed candidates get? At this point, that's unclear. And that does it for this week's episode of Crossroads Politics. For Emily, Ella, and all of us here at 13 News, thanks so much for watching. We hope to see you next time.